Hey Internet, it's your old friend Dominic here with the All-American Casino Guide, a channel dedicated to providing you with all the tips, tricks, tutorials, and trivia you need to know about casinos and casino games. Today we're going to be talking about the art of the bluff, when to do it and how to do it. But before we get into that, I'm going to remind you guys to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It's the only way you're going to guarantee to get notified every single time we upload a video to the channel. Before we get too much into the art of the bluff, I want you to go ahead and watch one of our older videos, the video we put up on body language, because I think body language is fundamentally one of the most important things to understand in order to think about how you can avoid giving away tells to your opponents that you are in fact bluffing or even holding a strong hand. And also, it gives you a good way of detecting when they might be bluffing because they could be doing something that would give away the fact that they're not holding a very good hand or they're in fact holding a very good one. One thing I will say about bluffing is it's most effective when you are late in the round to act, when you have a chance to gather all this information about other players and how they're playing, if they're playing tight, if they're playing loose. And essentially you can gather all that information based on their betting habits or their particular body language. So either someone who is right before the small blind or even the big blind, this is the kind of position you want to be in order to bluff effectively. That's not to say you can't bluff outside of position, but it just becomes increasingly more difficult. If you happen to make a bet and it's a bluff and someone calls you on it or even re-raises you, then the jig is up and ultimately you need to realize that it's time to get out of the hand. Because you're not going to convince them now all of a sudden that you weren't bluffing and that you somehow tricked them into the hand. You can't really double down in this particular situation. Another important thing to understand is that in order for a bet to be effective as a bluff is you need to make sure that when you bet, it seems to be a value-added bet that essentially is enough money that it scares people out of the hand. If you go in with just a bet that is 2x the big blind, that's probably not enough to scare people out of the hands. You need a bet that is as large as the pot, or even potentially a bet that is as much as half their chip stack in order to scare people out of a hand. The best time to start bluffing is pre-flop. Essentially, you create a narrative to the table that you had a strong hand from the get-go. If you go with a nice, good bluff bet early on, pre-flop, it already creates this idea in everyone's mind that you have a strong hand. And then you use the cards that come out in the flop to build this narrative, to build this story. You want to convince people that you're holding a hand that you don't actually have. But make sure that you don't just blindly call bluffs just because you think it's a good time to bluff. It's a good time to bluff when the cards on the table create the possibility of a reality that you're trying to convince them exists. Essentially, if there's not 3 spades on the table, then no one's going to think that you have a flush with spades. No one's going to think you have a straight if the cards on the board don't show the possibility of a straight draw. If 2 aces come up and you've already went ahead and made a large bluff bet pre-flop and 2 aces come up in the flop, you can almost create a narrative that you have the 3rd ace or even 4 aces. And this could be very scary to some people because they won't even want to take a chance because they already see those 2 aces. It scares the hell out of them and it'll get them out of the hand. Understand that with a bluff, you're not trying to go to a showdown. You're trying to make sure that you get everybody out of the hand and you just win the pot because there's nobody left in it except you. So my third point is actually kind of a combination of the previous point and my first primary point, which is you want to make sure that post-flop, you're late in position so you can observe all the other players, and also so that way you can create this narrative and you can read how they're playing, if they're playing tight or they're loose. If another player essentially beats you to a bluff bet or goes ahead and makes a value bet because they have a strong hand, you should read that early on and decide that, I should just get out of this hand because ultimately it's not the kind of hand I want to be in. Play your chips smart. You only have so many chips to play around with, and you don't want to get caught with your pants down and have to pay because you made the wrong decision. So in summation, the best times to bluff are when you're late in the round to actually make the bet. You also want to make sure that you bet pre-flop to create an initial narrative that you have a strong hand. Post-flop, you want to also make sure you're still in that late betting position and that you continue building that narrative. You're observant of the other players in their chip stacks and their play styles, if they're playing tight or playing loose. Also, make sure that your bets are consistently large enough that they scare players out of the hands because they're worried that it's actual gambling, and that they aren't already so chip committed that they'll be likely to push their chips in even more just because they don't want to lose the large amount of money they've already committed to the pot. So that concludes our introductory tutorial on bluffing. Make sure to check out that video I mentioned earlier on body language, because body language and bluffing, they kind of go hand in hand with each other and they're intrinsically linked. Make sure to pay attention to the channel in future, because we'll be putting advanced tutorials up that will have more concrete examples that you might be able to apply to your own game. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns about anything I've said, go ahead and leave them as comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, do us a big favor and clickety-clack that like button. Punch that subscribe button if you haven't already. Ring-a-ding-ding that notification bell, because it's the only way you're guaranteed to be notified every single time we put a video up on the channel. And if you can, guys, help us grow the channel by clicking that share button and throwing it all over the social media. My name is Dominic. This has been the All-American Casino Guide reminding you, play responsibly.